Silver Creek, Wyoming Territory, June 1875. The church bells of Silver Creek fell silent as the unthinkable happened. Amelia Sutton stood frozen at the altar, her white satin gown gleaming in the colored light streaming through stained glass windows. The assembled townsfolk collectively held their breath as Frederick Calloway, son of the region's wealthiest cattle baron, looked her straight in the eyes and uttered the words that would forever change her life. "I cannot do this. I am sorry." The gasp that swept through the church was like a gust of wind through prairie grass. Frederick turned on his polished boot heel and strode down the aisle, past shocked faces of family and friends, not once looking back at the woman he'd just abandoned. Amelia's hazel eyes, rimmed with unshed tears, stared after him, her chest tight with humiliation and disbelief. The ivory lace veil her mother had spent months sewing by candlelight suddenly felt heavy as a burial shroud. Her bouquet of white roses and baby's breath trembled in her gloved hands. At the back of the small church, a young man who had slipped in unnoticed during the ceremony watched with quiet intensity. Yates Tucker, 24 years old and newly returned to Silver Creek, had only meant to witness the wedding from a respectful distance. He hadn't expected to witness a betrayal. His deep blue eyes narrowed beneath the brim of his hat as he watched Frederick disappear through the church doors. Yates ran his hand through his sun-streaked brown hair, considering what he'd just witnessed. The abandoned bride stood dignified despite her obvious devastation, her honey blonde hair arranged in an elaborate style that complemented her delicate features and fair complexion. Chaos erupted as the bride's family surrounded her. The groom's family hurried out in embarrassment. Yates slipped out the side door, strode to where his chestnut gelding was hitched, and swung into the saddle with practiced ease. A plan was already forming in his mind. "Come on, Rusty," he murmured to his horse. "We've got somewhere to be." Amelia felt her knees threatening to buckle as her mother and sister guided her toward the vestry. The pitying glances of the wedding guests were like physical blows. 22 years of life hadn't prepared her for this moment. "How could he?" her sister Beatrice hissed. "After everything your father did to help the Calloways establish their ranch." Amelia's thoughts whirled like autumn leaves in a storm. Just yesterday, Frederick had kissed her hand and spoken of their future together. What had changed? What had she done wrong? "I need air," she managed to say, her corset suddenly impossibly tight. "Please, everyone, just give me a moment." Her mother's concerned face swam before her. "Darling, you cannot possibly be alone right now." "Just one moment," Amelia insisted, surprising herself with her firmness. Reluctantly, her family stepped back as she moved toward the church's rear exit. She needed escape from the suffocating sympathy, the whispered speculations. The heavy wooden door creaked as she pushed it open and stepped into the sunlight, gulping fresh air into her lungs. She had barely taken 3 steps when the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her look up. Coming toward her at a steady pace was a striking young cowboy astride a handsome chestnut horse. His broad shoulders were accentuated by a simple but well-maintained blue cotton shirt, his lean frame suggesting someone who worked hard for his living. Unlike the Eastern dandies who occasionally passed through town, everything about him spoke of practical capability. Amelia recognized him instantly, though it had been years since she'd seen him. Yates Tucker had left Silver Creek when she was 17, riding out to make his fortune after his family lost everything in the financial panic of '69. They had never been close. He was the son of a failed rancher, she the daughter of the town's most successful merchant. But everyone knew everyone in Silver Creek. He reined his horse to a stop before her, his expression serious but kind beneath the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, those piercing blue eyes seeming to see straight through her carefully maintained composure. "Miss Sutton," he said finally, his voice deeper than she remembered. "I believe you could use a ride right about now." Amelia blinked up at him in disbelief. "Mr. Tucker?" "Yates," he corrected gently. "I happen to be at the back of the church. Thought you might want to be anywhere, but here when everyone comes pouring out those doors." As if on cue, voices grew louder inside the church. Amelia glanced back, panic rising in her throat. The thought of facing the crowd, of enduring more pitying looks and awkward condolences, was suddenly unbearable. Yates extended his hand. "It's your choice, Miss Sutton, but I'm offering you a way out." Her mother would be scandalized. Her father would be furious. Proper young ladies did not ride off with cowboys, especially not on their wedding day. But Amelia had just been publicly humiliated by the man who was supposed to love her forever. What was left of propriety now? She reached up and took his hand. In one smooth motion, he pulled her up behind him. Amelia had barely settled on the horse, her wedding dress billowing around them both, when the church doors burst open. Gasps and calls of her name filled the air as wedding guests spilled onto the church steps. "Hold on," Yates said quietly. Amelia wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling the solid warmth of him through his shirt, and Yates urged his horse forward. As they rode away from the church and the cries of her family, something unexpected happened in Amelia's chest. Amid the humiliation and heartbreak, she felt a flutter of something that might have been relief. "Where are we going?" she called over the sound of hoofbeats. Yates glanced back at her, the sun catching the gold flecks in his blue eyes. "Somewhere you can breathe." They rode out of town at a steady pace, not so fast as to cause alarm, but quick enough to put distance between them and the church. The Wyoming landscape opened around them, rolling hills giving way to vast expanses of prairie dotted with sagebrush and wildflowers. The afternoon sun bathed everything in golden light, and despite everything, Amelia found herself taking in the beauty of the land she'd known all her life, but rarely experienced this freely. "Your dress is getting dusty," Yates observed after they'd ridden for nearly 20 minutes. Amelia looked down at the once pristine white satin, now smudged with dirt and creased beyond repair. "It hardly matters now." They crested a hill, and before them lay a small, crystal-clear pond fringed by cottonwood trees, one of the few water sources that didn't dry up during summer. Yates guided his horse to the shade of the largest tree and dismounted with easy grace. He turned and reached up to help Amelia down, his strong hands spanning her waist. "Thank you," she said, suddenly self-conscious as her feet touched the ground. The reality of what she'd done, riding off unchaperoned with a man she barely knew, began to sink in. I should not have done this. My family will be frantic." "Probably," Yates agreed, tying his horse to a low branch. "But sometimes a person needs space to think." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a canteen. "Water." Amelia accepted it gratefully, suddenly aware of how parched her throat was. As she drank, she studied him surreptitiously. Yates Tucker had grown into his features since she'd last seen him. His face was tanned from outdoor work, with faint smile lines around his eyes despite his youth. A light stubble shadowed his jawline, and his hands bore the calluses of hard work. "Why were you at the church?" she asked suddenly. "I didn't think you were friendly with the Callaways." A shadow crossed his face. "I'm not. I came to see the merchant's daughter marry." He paused. "I wanted to see if you looked happy." The simple honesty of his statement caught her off guard. "And did I? Look happy, I mean. Before?" "No," he said quietly. "You looked like someone facing the gallows with dignity." His words struck her like a physical blow. Amelia sank down onto the grassy bank, her enormous skirts pooling around her. Was it that obvious to everyone but me? Yates crouched beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "I couldn't say. I only know what I saw." "And what was that?" "A woman marrying for all the right reasons except the most important one." The tears Amelia had been holding back since the moment Frederick walked away finally spilled over. "How humiliating," she whispered. "Everyone will be talking about this for years." Poor Amelia Sutton, jilted at the altar. Yates remained silent, allowing her tears to flow without interruption or awkward attempts at comfort. When she finally quieted, he spoke. "May I ask you something, Miss Sutton?" She nodded, wiping her cheeks with her gloved hands. "Are you crying because you lost Frederick, or because you lost the future you thought you were going to have?" Amelia stared at him, startled by the insight of his question. She opened her mouth to defend her broken heart, then closed it again. The truth was like a stone in her stomach. She had been in love with the idea of marriage more than with Frederick himself. "I don't know," she admitted. "Perhaps both. Perhaps neither." She looked down at her ruined gown. "I feel like a fool." "Folks make mistakes all the time," Yates said, settling onto the grass near her. "Most aren't lucky enough to discover them before it's too late." "Lucky?" she repeated incredulously. "You think what happened today makes me lucky?" His gaze was steady. "I think a life spent with someone who doesn't truly want you would be a special kind of hell." The bluntness of his words silenced her. They sat together as the afternoon light shifted through the cottonwood leaves, creating dappled patterns on the ground. In the distance, a meadowlark trilled its distinctive song. "You've changed, Yates Tucker," Amelia said finally. "You used to barely string two words together when our paths crossed." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. 6 years working cattle drives from Texas to Montana gives a man time to think. And occasionally, to learn how to speak his mind. "Where have you been all this time? We heard your family moved to Colorado after." She trailed off, not wanting to mention his family's financial ruin directly. "After we lost everything," he finished for her. "They did. I went south to Texas, found work with the big outfits. Worked my way up from wrangler to trail boss." Pride colored his voice. "Saved enough to buy a small spread just north of here. Came back to start something of my own." Amelia's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You own land now?" 300 acres. Not much compared to the Callaways, but it's mine. Free and clear." He plucked a blade of grass and twisted it between his fingers. "Got 50 head of decent cattle and some promising horse flesh." "That's impressive," she said, genuinely meaning it. Many men worked their whole lives and never achieved what he had at 24. Yates shrugged. "It's a start. I aim to build something that lasts." A comfortable silence fell between them. Amelia found herself studying his profile, the straight nose, the firm jaw, the way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. There was something compelling about him that had nothing to do with conventional handsomeness. It was more a quiet surety, a sense of knowing exactly who he was. "I should take you back," he said eventually, though he made no move to stand. "Your family will be worried sick." "They'll be furious," Amelia corrected. "Running off with a man on my wedding day. My reputation will be in tatters." She gave a hollow laugh. "Though I suppose being jilted at the altar already did that." Yates turned to face her fully. "Is that what matters to you? Your reputation? Isn't that what matters to everyone?" "Not to me," he said simply. "Easy for you to say. Men can recover from scandal. Women become defined by it." He acknowledged this with a nod. "True enough. But there's a difference between respecting society's rules and being imprisoned by them." The conversation was veering into territory Amelia found both uncomfortable and exhilarating. No one in her circle spoke so frankly about such things. Young ladies were taught to navigate society's expectations without ever openly questioning them. "We should go back," she said, rising to her feet. Her legs felt stiff after sitting on the ground, and her corset dug into her ribs. "I need to face whatever awaits me." Yates stood and offered his hand to steady her. "For what it's worth, Miss Sutton, I think you're stronger than you realize." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a current of understanding that neither acknowledged aloud. He helped her back onto his horse and mounted behind her this time, one arm around her waist to secure her as they began the journey back to Silver Creek. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains when they reached the outskirts of town. Yates reined his horse to a stop. "Would you prefer I take you directly home, or to the church?" he asked. Amelia hesitated. "Home, please. I cannot face the church again today." As they rode down Main Street, heads turned and whispers followed. Amelia sat straight-backed, her chin lifted despite her tear-stained face and ruined dress. Yates guided his horse with quiet confidence, seeming unbothered by the attention they drew. They reached the Sutton home, a handsome 2-story residence with a wide front porch, to find several horses and carriages outside. Through the front windows, Amelia could see figures moving about anxiously. "Looks like you have a search party assembled," Yates observed. Before Amelia could respond, the front door burst open, and her father strode onto the porch. Charles Sutton's face, normally jovial and welcoming, was thunderous with worry and anger. Behind him appeared her mother and sister, both red-eyed from crying. "Amelia Rose Sutton," her father bellowed as Yates brought the horse to a stop. "Where in God's name have you been?" Yates dismounted and reached up to help Amelia down. She felt a momentary reluctance to leave the relative safety of his presence and face her family's questions and recriminations. "Mr. Sutton," Yates said, stepping forward and removing his hat respectfully. "Your daughter needed some time away from prying eyes. I offered her a ride and a quiet place to collect herself. The fault is entirely mine." Charles Sutton's gaze shifted from his daughter to the young cowboy. "Tucker's boy," he said, recognition dawning. "I heard you were back in these parts." "Yes, sir." Got a small ranch north of here now. And you thought it appropriate to ride off with my daughter on her wedding day? The merchant's voice was dangerously quiet. Amelia stepped between them. Father, please. Mr. Tucker was only being kind. After what happened, I couldn't bear to face everyone. He offered me an escape, nothing more. Her mother hurried down the porch steps. Amelia, do you have any idea what people are saying? First Frederick leaves you at the altar, then you disappear with some cowhand. She cast a disparaging glance at Yates. The scandal is unimaginable. Mrs. Sutton, Yates said, his tone respectful but firm. Your daughter has been through enough today without adding to her burden. Nothing improper happened. You have my word as a gentleman. Eleanor Sutton looked as though she might argue that a cowboy had no right to call himself a gentleman. But her husband placed a restraining hand on her arm. Tucker, Charles Sutton said after a moment, I appreciate your bringing my daughter home safely. However, I think it's best you leave now. We have family matters to discuss. Yates nodded, knowing dismissal when he heard it. He turned to Amelia, his expression softening. Miss Sutton, I wish you well. Their eyes met, and Amelia felt a strange reluctance to see him go. Thank you, Mr. Tucker, for everything. He placed his hat back on his head, mounted his horse, and with one last glance at Amelia, rode away. She watched him go, an inexplicable sense of loss settling in her chest. Inside, Amelia, her father said, his tone brooking no argument. Now, as she followed her family into the house, Amelia couldn't help but look back once more at the retreating figure of Yates Tucker. In the span of a few hours, her life had been upended completely. The future she had planned was gone, her reputation likely in tatters, and yet all she could think about was the quiet strength in a pair of blue eyes and the feeling of safety she'd found in the arms of a man she barely knew. Little did she know that Yates Tucker was thinking of her too, his mind already working on how their paths might cross again. The abandoned bride and the cowboy who rode up quietly. Their story was only just beginning. 2 weeks passed, and Silver Creek buzzed with gossip about the jilted bride and her mysterious disappearance with Yates Tucker. Amelia remained largely confined to her home, both by her own choice and her mother's insistence. The humiliation of Frederick's rejection was compounded by speculation about her ride with the young rancher. Frederick Calloway had left town the day after the failed wedding, reportedly heading east to Boston. A letter arrived for Amelia 3 days later, full of stilted apologies and vague explanations about realizing they wanted different things from life. She had read it once and then fed it to the fire, watching the paper curl and blacken with a strange detachment. On a warm Tuesday morning, Amelia sat on the back porch of the Sutton home, a book open but unread in her lap. Her father had gone to his mercantile, her mother was visiting the pastor's wife, and for the first time in days, she was blessedly alone. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her look up. Her heart quickened as she recognized the rider coming up the back lane. Yates Tucker, sitting tall in the saddle, his hat pulled low against the morning sun. He dismounted at the garden gate, hesitating there as if uncertain of his welcome. Miss Sutton, he called. Might I have a word? Amelia glanced toward the house, knowing she should refuse. Proper young ladies did not entertain young men alone, especially not men who had already caused talk. But 2 weeks of confinement and sympathetic looks had worn her patience thin. You may come in, Mr. Tucker, she said, closing her book. Though I should warn you my reputation can hardly withstand another scandal. He smiled as he opened the gate, and something fluttered in her chest. I'll be brief, he promised, approaching the porch but remaining at the bottom of the steps. I wanted to see how you're faring. Amelia smoothed her skirts. A simple day dress of blue cotton, nothing like the elaborate satin wedding gown she'd worn when they last met. As well as can be expected, the gossip is persistent. I've heard, he said, removing his hat. His brown hair caught the sunlight, showing hints of gold. I'm sorry if I added to your troubles. You didn't, she said truthfully. If anything, you were the only bright spot in that horrible day. The admission surprised her as much as it seemed to surprise him. Yates studied her face. You look better. More yourself, somehow. And how would you know what I look like as myself, Mr. Tucker? We've hardly spoken 2 words to each other before that day. I've known you my whole life, Miss Sutton, he said simply. Maybe not up close, but I've watched you grow up same as everyone else in Silver Creek. And if you don't mind my saying so, you've always held yourself a certain way, head high, shoulders straight, like you know exactly who you are. You didn't look that way at the church. Amelia was startled by his observation. You're more perceptive than most, Mr. Tucker. He shrugged, a slight flush coloring his cheekbones. Just observant. Listen, I didn't come just to check on you. I came with a proposition. A proposition? She repeated, her eyebrows rising. My ranch needs help. I've got the cattle and horses sorted, but the house is… He hesitated. Well, it's barely fit for habitation. I need someone who knows about furnishings, curtains, the things that make a house livable. And you thought of me? Amelia was genuinely puzzled. Your father's mercantile supplies half the territory. I figured you'd know quality goods when you see them. He shifted his weight, suddenly seeming younger. I'm heading to Cheyenne next week to buy supplies. Thought you might want to come along. As a paid consultant, of course. Your father and mother too, if they wish. Amelia stared at him, trying to decipher his true intent. You want to hire me, to help you shop for household goods? I'm offering you a legitimate reason to get out of town for a few days, he said quietly. And yes, I genuinely need the help. I've been sleeping on a bedroll on the floor because I haven't had time to order proper furniture. The offer was tempting. Escape from Silver Creek's whispers, a chance to focus on something other than her humiliation. But suspicion nagged at her. Why me, Mr. Tucker? There are plenty of married women in town who would be better suited to advise you on establishing a household. His blue eyes met hers directly. Because you're the only person in Silver Creek who might understand what it's like to need a fresh start. The honesty of his answer silenced her objections. They looked at each other for a long moment, and Amelia felt something shift between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits despite their different stations in life. I'll speak to my father, she said finally. I make no promises. Relief softened his features. That's all I ask. He placed his hat back on his head. I'll call on Mr. Sutton at the mercantile tomorrow, make the offer formal-like. As he turned to leave, Amelia called after him. Mr. Tucker? He paused, looking back. Why did you really come to my wedding? A complicated expression crossed his face. Maybe someday I'll tell you, he said. But not today. With that enigmatic answer, he mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Amelia with more questions than answers, and the first genuine spark of interest she'd felt since her world collapsed at the altar. To everyone's surprise, Charles Sutton agreed to Yates Tucker's proposal. Perhaps he recognized his daughter's need for distraction, or perhaps he saw a business opportunity in helping a young rancher establish himself. Whatever his reasoning, arrangements were made for Amelia to accompany Yates to Cheyenne, properly chaperoned by her father's trusted clerk, Mr. Hollister, a serious older gentleman who had worked for the Suttons for 20 years. They departed on a clear Monday morning by train, the newest luxury available since the Union Pacific had extended its line through southern Wyoming. Amelia sat beside the window in her traveling suit of forest green wool, watching Silver Creek fade into the distance. Across from her sat Mr. Hollister, already absorbed in his newspaper, while Yates occupied the seat beside him, looking slightly uncomfortable in his best shirt and vest. Have you traveled by train before, Mr. Tucker? Amelia asked as the locomotive picked up speed. Once or twice, he replied. Prefer horses, myself. You can't get thrown from a train, but you can't exactly tell it where to go either. She smiled at his assessment. I suppose there's wisdom in that. The journey to Cheyenne would take most of the day. As the Wyoming landscape rolled past the window, Amelia found herself studying Yates when he wasn't looking. There was something compelling about him, a quiet confidence that had nothing to do with money or social position. He carried himself like a man who had tested his limits and knew his worth. Miss Sutton, he said, catching her gaze. I've been meaning to ask, have you heard from Calloway since? He trailed off, apparently realizing the indelicacy of his question. Mr. Hollister lowered his newspaper with a disapproving frown, but Amelia waved away his concern. It's all right, Mr. Hollister. She turned back to Yates. Frederick sent a letter. It explained nothing and helped less. I believe he's in Boston now. Yates nodded thoughtfully. Some men aren't cut out for life out here. Takes a certain kind of spine to build something in these territories. And you believe you have that spine, Mr. Tucker? She asked, genuinely curious. His eyes met hers. I know I do. I've been knocked down more than once. Still standing. The simple statement held no bravado, just quiet certainty. Amelia found herself believing him. The train journey passed more pleasantly than she had anticipated. Yates proved to be an engaging conversationalist when drawn out, speaking knowledgeably about the territories they passed through, the cattle business, and his hopes for his ranch. By the time they reached Cheyenne in the late afternoon, Amelia had almost forgotten they were traveling for business rather than pleasure. Cheyenne in 1875 was a bustling city, having transformed from a rough railroad town to the territorial capital in just 7 years. The streets were busy with commerce, cowboys and soldiers mingling with businessmen and women in fashionable dress. After checking into the Interocean Hotel, separate rooms for Amelia, Mr. Hollister, and Yates, of course, they agreed to begin their shopping the following morning. Alone in her hotel room that evening, Amelia stood by the window watching the activity on the streets below. For the first time since her failed wedding, she felt something like anticipation stirring in her heart. Whether it was the change of scenery or the company, she couldn't say, but she welcomed the respite from her grief and humiliation. The next 3 days passed in a flurry of productive activity. Amelia discovered she had a talent for advising Yates on practical matters of household establishment. They visited furniture makers, dry goods stores, and hardware merchants, compiling a substantial order to be shipped to his ranch. "You have good taste, Miss Sutton," Yates commented as they left a houseware store on the third day. "Practical, but not plain. High praise from a man who's been sleeping on the floor," she teased, surprising herself with her boldness. He laughed, the sound warming something inside her. "Fair point. Though I've slept on worse during cattle drives. At least my floor doesn't move or try to trample me." Mr. Hollister cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should return to the hotel. It will be dark soon." "One more stop," Yates said. "There's something I'd like Miss Sutton's opinion on." He led them to a small shop tucked between a milliner's and a bootmaker's. A discreet sign identified it as Harrington's Fine Jewelry. Amelia raised an eyebrow at Yates, who merely held the door open for her with a mysterious smile. Inside, the shop was modest but elegant. Glass cases displayed an assortment of watches, rings, and brooches. The proprietor, a slender man with spectacles, greeted them warmly. "Mr. Tucker," he said, "I have the item you inquired about yesterday." Yates nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Harrington." The jeweler disappeared into a back room, returning moments later with a small wooden box. He placed it on the counter and opened it carefully. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, lay a silver pendant in the shape of a wildflower, a columbine, Wyoming's native bloom. A small, perfect pearl formed its center, catching the light with a soft glow. "It's beautiful," Amelia breathed, admiring the craftsmanship. "It's for my mother," Yates explained. "Her birthday is next month. I wanted to get her something special, now that I can afford to." The sentiment touched Amelia deeply. Many young men in his position, newly prosperous after years of struggle, would spend their money on themselves first. That Yates thought of his mother spoke volumes about his character. "She'll treasure it," Amelia said sincerely. "It's lovely without being ostentatious." "My thoughts exactly," Yates said, looking pleased. "I'll take it, Mr. Harrington." As the jeweler wrapped the purchase, Amelia noticed Yates glancing at a display case containing rings. She quickly looked away, not wanting him to catch her watching him. An odd flutter of something she didn't want to examine too closely passed through her chest. Their business in Cheyenne concluded successfully. They departed the following morning. The train journey back to Silver Creek seemed to pass all too quickly. Amelia found herself reluctant to return to the gossip and pitying glances that awaited her. As the train neared their destination, Yates moved to sit beside her while Mr. Hollister visited the dining car. "I wanted to thank you," he said quietly. "You've been more helpful than you know." Amelia smiled. "It was my pleasure. Truly, I've enjoyed these few days away. I hope," he began, then stopped himself. "That is, I wonder if you might consider visiting the ranch once the furnishings arrive, to see your recommendations in place." Their eyes met, and Amelia felt a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the summer heat. "I would like that," she said softly, "if it can be arranged properly." "I'll speak with your father," Yates promised. "Do everything by the book." Mr. Hollister returned then, and Yates moved back to his original seat. But something had changed between them. A possibility had opened, tentative but real. As the train pulled into Silver Creek Station, Amelia gazed out the window at the familiar buildings and streets. She had left town 4 days ago feeling broken and humiliated. She returned with something unexpected taking root in her heart. Hope, fragile but persistent, like the first green shoot after a prairie fire. What neither of them realized was that their return to Silver Creek would bring more than just the renewal of local gossip. A letter had arrived in their absence, its contents about to upend the delicate new understanding growing between them. Amelia knew something was wrong the moment they entered her family's home. Her mother's face was taut with anxiety, and her father paced the parlor with uncharacteristic restlessness. "What is it?" she asked, alarm rising in her throat. "Has something happened?" Charles Sutton thrust a letter toward her. "This came yesterday. From Frederick." Amelia took the paper with trembling fingers, Yates and Mr. Hollister forgotten in the doorway behind her. The letter was brief, the handwriting hurried. "My dear Mr. and Mrs. Sutton, I write with deepest regret and apology for my unconscionable behavior. The truth, which I was too cowardly to admit, is that I find myself in significant financial trouble. The Callaway Ranch is deeply indebted, a fact my father concealed from everyone, including me, until the day before the wedding. I could not in good conscience bind Amelia to a man who might soon be penniless. I have secured a position with a banking firm in Boston and intend to work to restore our family's fortunes. If Amelia can find it in her heart to forgive me, I would like to renew our engagement once my situation improves. With sincere apologies." Frederick Callaway. Amelia read the words twice, hardly able to believe them. All this time, she had thought Frederick rejected her, that there was something lacking in her that made him turn away at the last moment. To learn it was financial trouble, something entirely external to her, was both a relief and a new kind of pain. "This changes things," her mother said, watching her face closely. "He didn't reject you, darling. He thought he was protecting you." Amelia looked up, suddenly remembering they weren't alone. Yates stood in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral as he took in the scene before him. "Mr. Tucker," Charles Sutton said, noticing him for the first time. "Thank you for escorting my daughter safely. Mr. Hollister, will you see him out? We have family matters to discuss." "Of course," the older man murmured. "Come along, Mr. Tucker." Yates hesitated, his eyes seeking Amelia's. She wanted to say something, to explain, but words failed her. With a slight nod, he turned and followed Mr. Hollister from the room. As soon as the door closed, Eleanor Sutton rushed to her daughter's side. "Frederick still wants you," she said urgently. "He's working to rebuild his fortune. This changes everything." "Does it?" Amelia asked, her mind whirling. "He still left me at the altar, Mother, in front of the entire town." "He made a mistake," her father said, more gently. "One born of pride and misplaced honor, perhaps, but not of rejection. He thought he was doing right by you." Amelia sank into a chair, the letter still clutched in her hand. "I don't know what to think." "Think about your future," her mother pressed. "The Callaways have been wealthy for generations. This setback will be temporary. Frederick is well-educated, connected in Boston society. He'll recover his position, and you could still have the life you've always wanted." Had that been the life she wanted? Just weeks ago, Amelia would have said yes without hesitation. Now, she wasn't so certain. The image of Yates Tucker's face as he turned to leave flashed in her mind, the carefully masked hurt in his eyes, the tight set of his jaw. "I need time," she said finally. "This is unexpected." Her parents exchanged a glance loaded with meaning she couldn't quite decipher. "Of course, darling," her father said. "Take all the time you need. But perhaps," he cleared his throat, "perhaps it would be wise to be more circumspect in your associations while you consider Frederick's letter. The town already talks." The meaning was clear. Yates Tucker was not an appropriate companion for a young woman who might still make an advantageous marriage. Amelia felt a flare of indignation, but exhaustion won out. She nodded mutely and retired to her room, her thoughts in turmoil. That night, sleep eluded her. She stood at her window, gazing out at the star-filled Wyoming sky, wondering what Yates was thinking. Had he heard about Frederick's letter already? In a town like Silver Creek, news traveled faster than telegraph messages. The next morning brought no clarity. Amelia went through the motions of her daily routine, her mind elsewhere. Just after noon, a delivery boy brought a small package to the door. "For Miss Sutton," he said, handing it to her directly. Alone in the parlor, Amelia unwrapped the brown paper to find a small wooden box, the same type she had seen in the Cheyenne jewelry shop. Her heart quickened as she opened it. Inside lay not the columbine pendant Yates had purchased for his mother, but a simple silver bracelet adorned with a single charm, a tiny horseshoe for luck. A folded note accompanied it. Miss Sutton, I heard about Calloway's letter. Whatever you decide, I wish you happiness. Thank you for your help in Cheyenne. The ranch will be better for it. Respectfully, Whitey. Amelia ran her fingers over the delicate bracelet, tears pricking her eyes. The gift was modest enough to be proper, yet personal enough to convey what words could not. Yates Tucker was giving her space to make her choice without pressure, while letting her know he cared enough to wish her well. She slipped the bracelet onto her wrist, its weight both unfamiliar and comforting. As she tucked the note into her desk drawer, Amelia realized she had a decision to make, one that would shape the rest of her life. 2 weeks passed with no word from either Frederick or Yates. Amelia moved through her days like a sleepwalker, helping at her father's store, attending church services, and enduring the speculative glances of Silver Creek's residents. The silver bracelet remained hidden in her jewelry box, too painful a reminder of possibilities that seemed to be slipping away. Her mother spoke often of Frederick, constructing elaborate scenarios of his triumphant return once his financial situation improved. Her father was more reserved, but made his preferences clear through subtle comments about the stability of established families versus the uncertain prospects of newcomers to the territory. On a sweltering August afternoon, Amelia was arranging a display of imported fabrics in the mercantile when the bell above the door jangled. She looked up to see Margaret Calloway, Frederick's mother, entering the store. The older woman's face was drawn, her usually impeccable appearance slightly faded. "Mrs. Calloway," Amelia said, straightening in surprise. "Welcome." "Amelia, dear," Margaret said, her voice strained. "Might we speak privately?" Curious and apprehensive, Amelia led her to the small office at the back of the store. Once the door was closed, Margaret seemed to deflate, sinking into a chair with uncharacteristic weariness. "I suppose you've heard about our situation," she said without preamble. "Robert's investments, the debts, it's all true, I'm afraid. Frederick wrote to my parents," Amelia confirmed. "I'm sorry for your troubles, Mrs. Calloway." Margaret studied her face. "Are you? Most young women in your position would be counting their blessings for the narrow escape." "I wouldn't wish financial ruin on anyone," Amelia said carefully. "Especially not a family I've known all my life." The older woman's eyes filled with tears. "You're a good girl, Amelia. Better than we deserved, perhaps." She reached into her reticule and withdrew an envelope. "I've come with news. Frederick is engaged." The words hit Amelia like a physical blow. "Engaged? But his letter," he said when his situation improved. "Things changed quickly," Margaret said, her tone bitter. "He met a Boston banker's daughter. The marriage will secure his position and help salvage what's left of the Calloway fortune." She extended the envelope. "He asked me to give you this. His explanation, such as it is." Amelia took the letter automatically, her mind struggling to process this new betrayal. "He's been gone barely a month. Men like Frederick adapt quickly to necessity," Margaret said, rising. "For what it's worth, I believe he did care for you in his way, just not enough to choose a harder path." After Margaret left, Amelia sat motionless in the small office, Frederick's unopened letter in her lap. Part of her wanted to tear it to pieces unread. Another part needed to know his words, to finally close this chapter of her life. Finally, she broke the seal. "My dear Amelia, by now Mother will have told you my news. I can only imagine what you must think of me, and I wouldn't blame you for despising my very name. Please know that I never intended to cause you pain. Life in Boston has offered opportunities one never anticipated. Elizabeth's father has taken me into his banking firm with promises of rapid advancement. Our marriage will cement the arrangement. I tell you this not to hurt you further, but because you deserve honesty after my cowardice at our wedding. You are too good for me, Amelia. I see that clearly now. You deserve someone who would choose you above all else, regardless of circumstance. I fear I have never been that man. Please forgive me, if you can, and find happiness with someone worthy of your heart. Sincerely." Frederick. Amelia read the letter twice, a strange calm settling over her. The pain she expected was there, but muted, like an echo of something once sharp and immediate. What she felt most powerfully was relief. Relief that the uncertainty was over, that she need no longer wonder if Frederick would return to claim her. She was free. The realization flooded her with sudden, dizzying clarity. Free from expectations, from the future that had been planned for her since she was 18. Free to make her own choice. Rising from the chair with new determination, Amelia tucked Frederick's letter into her pocket and walked out of the office. Her father looked up from his ledger as she passed the counter. "Amelia, where are you going?" "I need some air," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "And then I have a call to make." Before he could question her further, she was out the door and moving purposefully down the boardwalk. The afternoon sun beat down on Silver Creek's main street, dust rising from the passage of wagons and horses. Amelia barely noticed the heat as she walked to the town's small telegraph office. Inside, the operator looked up in surprise. "Miss Sutton, what can I do for you today?" "I need to send a message," she said, reaching for the pencil and form he offered. "To the Tucker Ranch, north of town." The man raised an eyebrow but asked no questions as Amelia carefully wrote out her message. "Frederick engaged T.O. Boston banker's daughter. My answer to your unasked question is yes. Will you call tomorrow?" "Yes." She counted out coins for the fee and waited while the operator sent the message, the telegraph key clicking rhythmically. When he finished, he turned to her with a nod. "Sent, Miss Sutton. Would you like to wait for a reply?" Amelia considered for a moment. "Yes," she decided. "I'll wait." She took a seat on the wooden bench by the window, watching the activity on the street outside while her heart beat a rapid tattoo against her ribs. Had she been too forward? What if Yates had changed his mind in the weeks since she'd seen him? What if she had misinterpreted his intentions entirely? The wait seemed interminable, though in reality it was less than 30 minutes before the telegraph key began clicking again. The operator jotted down the incoming message, then handed the slip of paper to Amelia with a poorly concealed look of curiosity. "We'll be there at noon. Bring the bracelet." YT Amelia clutched the paper, a smile spreading across her face. She thanked the operator and stepped back onto the street, feeling lighter than she had in months. The path ahead was uncertain, perhaps even scandalous by Silver Creek standards, but for the first time since she could remember, it was her path, chosen freely. That evening, she told her parents about Frederick's engagement and her communication with Yates. The ensuing argument was as heated as she had expected. Her mother was aghast at the idea of Amelia receiving a man who was neither family nor an approved suitor. Her father, surprisingly, was more measured in his response. "Are you certain, Amelia?" he asked when her mother had exhausted her objections. "Tucker seems a decent enough young man, but he's just getting established. Life with him would be very different from what you've known." "I'm not certain of anything, Father," she answered honestly. "Except that I want the chance to find out for myself what kind of life would make me happy." Charles Sutton studied his daughter's face for a long moment. "You've changed," he said finally. "Since the wedding, you've become stronger somehow." "Not changed," Amelia corrected gently. "Just more myself, perhaps." In the end, they reached a compromise. Yates would be received in the parlor the following day, with both parents present. Amelia accepted these terms gracefully, knowing it was more consideration than many daughters would receive. That night, she took the silver bracelet from her jewelry box and fastened it around her wrist. The tiny horseshoe caught the lamplight, glinting with promise. Whatever happened tomorrow, Amelia knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had found her own voice at last, and she would never again let it be silenced by others' expectations. At precisely noon the next day, Yates Tucker rode up to the Sutton home. From her bedroom window, Amelia watched him dismount and straighten his clothing. A new shirt and vest, she noticed, with polished boots and his best hat. He had made an effort for this visit, and the realization warmed her. She checked her own appearance one last time in the mirror. A dress of soft blue cotton that complemented her eyes, her honey blonde hair arranged simply but becomingly, and the silver bracelet visible at her wrist. Taking a deep breath to steady her nerves, she descended the stairs to the parlor where her parents waited. The knock at the door came moments later. Mr. Sutton answered it himself, ushering Yates into the formal room with stiff politeness. Mrs. Sutton sat rigidly on the settee, her expression carefully neutral. And then Yates was there, hat in hand, his blue eyes finding Amelia immediately. The genuine smile that broke across his face at the sight of her made her heart skip. "Miss Sutton," he said, inclining his head respectfully. "Mr. and Mrs. Sutton, thank you for receiving me." "Mr. Tucker," Charles Sutton replied, gesturing to a chair. "Please sit down." As they took their seats, Amelia beside her mother on the settee, Yates in the armchair opposite, and Mr. Sutton standing by the fireplace, an awkward silence fell over the room. Amelia's mother broke it with practiced social grace. "We understand you've established a ranch north of town, Mr. Tucker. How are you finding it?" "Coming along well, ma'am," Yates answered. "The house is nearly ready now, thanks to Miss Sutton's advice in Cheyenne. The furnishings arrived last week." "I'm glad to hear it," Amelia said, meeting his gaze. She turned her wrist slightly, ensuring he saw the bracelet she wore. The flash of pleasure in his eyes was unmistakable. "Mr. Tucker," Charles Sutton said, moving directly to the matter at hand, "I believe you know that Frederick Calloway has become engaged to another woman." "Yes, sir. News travels fast in these parts." "Indeed." Mr. Sutton's expression was unreadable. "And I understand you've exchanged communications with my daughter since learning this." Yates nodded, sitting straighter in his chair. "I have, sir. With the greatest respect for Miss Sutton and your family. What are your intentions toward my daughter, Mr. Tucker?" The question was blunt, but not unkind. Amelia held her breath. This was the moment that would determine her future. Yates looked directly at her father, his gaze steady. "Mr. Sutton, I admire your daughter greatly. Her grace under difficult circumstances, her intelligence, her kindness. These are qualities any man would be fortunate to find in a wife." Mrs. Sutton made a small sound of surprise at his directness, but Yates continued without wavering. "I know I'm not what you might have hoped for in a son-in-law. I have no family fortune, no connections in Eastern society. What I do have is 300 acres of good land, a growing herd of quality cattle, and 2 strong hands willing to work from sunup to sundown to build something worthwhile." His voice grew more passionate. "I can offer Amelia, Miss Sutton, a comfortable home, honest love, and my solemn promise to cherish her all the days of my life." The room fell silent. Amelia's throat tightened with emotion at his words, simple, sincere, and more romantic than any flowery declaration could have been. Charles Sutton cleared his throat. "That's forthright, Mr. Tucker. Seemed best to speak plain, sir. And what does my daughter have to say about this?" Mr. Sutton looked to Amelia, one eyebrow raised. All eyes turned to her. Amelia felt a momentary flutter of nerves, then a calm certainty settled over her. "I would like your blessing, father, mother, to come to know Mr. Tucker better. Properly, of course." "You wish to court?" her mother asked, sounding faintly scandalized despite the conventionality of the request. "Yes," Amelia said firmly. "I believe Mr. Tucker and I might suit one another very well, given the chance to discover if that's true." Charles and Eleanor Sutton exchanged a long look, years of marriage allowing them to communicate silently. Finally, Mr. Sutton turned back to Yates. "You understand, Mr. Tucker, that my daughter has recently experienced a significant disappointment. I would not see her rushed into another attachment without proper time for reflection." "I understand completely, sir," Yates replied. "I'm not asking for her hand today, only for permission to call on her, to show her the man I am and the life I can provide." Mr. Sutton nodded slowly. "Very well. You may call on Sundays after church, and perhaps join us for dinner once a week, if Amelia wishes it." Relief and joy bloomed in Amelia's chest. It was more than she had dared hope for. A chance, at least, to explore the connection she felt with Yates without scandal or secrecy. "Thank you, father," she said sincerely. "Mother." Eleanor Sutton's expression softened slightly. "Well, I suppose proper courtship is the traditional way of things." The conversation shifted to lighter topics: the weather, the upcoming harvest festival, news from the territorial capital. Throughout it all, Amelia was acutely aware of Yates's presence, the way his eyes returned to her face again and again with undisguised admiration. When it came time for him to depart, Amelia walked with him to the front door while her parents remained tactfully in the parlor. "I meant every word," Yates said quietly when they reached the entryway. "I know," Amelia replied, her fingers unconsciously touching the bracelet at her wrist. "That's why I said yes." He smiled, the expression transforming his face. "Sunday seems very far away." "It does," she agreed. "But we have time now. No need to rush." Yates reached for her hand, holding it briefly between both of his. The touch was proper enough should anyone see, yet intimate in its gentleness. Until Sunday, then. As she watched him ride away, Amelia felt as though a new chapter of her life was beginning, one written in her own hand, not dictated by others' expectations. The path ahead might not be easy or conventional, but it would be hers to choose, step by step. And if the first steps led toward a young rancher with honest blue eyes and a heart as vast as the Wyoming sky, well, perhaps that was exactly where she was meant to go all along. Autumn painted the Wyoming landscape in shades of gold and amber as Yates and Amelia's courtship progressed through September and into October. Each Sunday after church, he called at the Sutton home, sometimes taking Amelia for carefully chaperoned drives in his newly purchased buggy. On Thursday evenings, he joined the family for dinner, gradually winning over even the reluctant Mrs. Sutton with his quiet intelligence and genuine respect for her daughter. Silver Creek's initial scandal over the jilted bride and the cowboy faded as newer gossip took its place. The townspeople grew accustomed to seeing Yates and Amelia together, their obvious affection for one another softening even the most critical observers. On a crisp Sunday in late October, Yates arrived at the Sutton home with a special request. "I'd like to show Amelia the ranch," he said to her parents. "It's finally ready for visitors." Mrs. Sutton frowned. "Surely that wouldn't be appropriate, Mr. Tucker. A young woman visiting a bachelor's home." "My foreman's wife will be there to chaperone," Yates assured her. "And I thought perhaps Mr. Sutton might like to come as well, to see the operation." Charles Sutton, who had developed a grudging respect for the young rancher's business acumen, nodded thoughtfully. "I wouldn't mind seeing your setup, Tucker. Might be good to know what supplies you'll be needing in the future." And so it was arranged. The following Saturday, Yates drove his buggy to the Sutton home to collect Amelia and her father for the visit to Tucker Ranch. The journey north of town took nearly an hour, following a well-maintained road that eventually gave way to a narrower trail. As they crested a final hill, Yates reined the horses to a stop, allowing his passengers their first view of his property. Below them stretched a verdant valley watered by a creek that gleamed silver in the autumn sunlight. A substantial log house stood on a gentle rise, smoke curling from its stone chimney. Nearby were a large barn, corrals containing horses, and in the distance, cattle grazing on the open range. The buildings were new but solidly constructed, the land well chosen for both beauty and practicality. "It's wonderful," Amelia breathed, taking in the scene. Even her father looked impressed. "Good water source," he commented. "Smart positioning for the house. High ground. View of the approach." Yates nodded, pleased by the approval. "Creek runs year-round, even in drought years. Previous owners started the improvements, but fell ill and had to sell. I got lucky." As they drove down toward the house, a middle-aged couple emerged onto the porch. The foreman, John Hendricks, and his wife Martha, who served as cook and housekeeper when Yates needed help. They welcomed the visitors warmly, Martha immediately taking charge of refreshments while John offered to show Mr. Sutton the barns and livestock. This left Yates free to give Amelia a tour of the house, properly accompanied by Martha, who maintained a discreet distance while remaining in sight. "It's lovely," Amelia said as she moved through the main room, noting the comfortable furnishings they had selected in Cheyenne. Large windows admitted ample light, and the stone fireplace provided both warmth and a focal point for the space. "You've done so much in such a short time." "Had good help," Yates replied, watching her face as she explored. "And strong motivation." Their eyes met, and Amelia felt the now familiar flutter in her chest that his presence always evoked. Over the past 2 months, she had come to know Yates Tucker well, his quiet strength, his dry humor, his unwavering integrity. The attraction she had felt from the beginning had deepened into something far more meaningful. "Would you like to see the view from the back porch?" he asked. "It's the best part of the house, I think." Martha followed at a respectable distance as they stepped outside. The porch faced west toward the mountains, offering a spectacular vista of peaks already dusted with early snow. A comfortable swing hung from the rafters, positioned to take full advantage of the view. "Oh," Amelia sighed, genuinely moved by the beauty before her. "I could look at this forever." Yates stood beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth in the crisp autumn air. "That was my hope," he said softly. She turned to find him watching her, his blue eyes serious. What do you mean? He glanced at Martha, who nodded almost imperceptibly and stepped back inside, leaving the door ajar, technically still chaperoning, but giving them a moment of relative privacy. Amelia, Yates said, taking her hands in his. I built this house with you in mind. Every window, every room, I imagined you here. Her breath caught. Yates, I know it's been only a few months, he continued, his voice low and earnest. I don't want to rush you, but I also want you to know that everything I've done since coming back to Silver Creek has been leading to this moment. He squeezed her hands gently. I love you. I think I've loved you since I was 16 years old, watching you from afar, never dreaming I could ever be worthy of you. Tears pricked Amelia's eyes. Is that why you came to the church that day? You've never told me. He nodded, a flush coloring his cheekbones. I had to see for myself if you were truly happy. I told myself if you were, I'd wish you well and move on. But when I saw you standing there, he shook his head, remembering. You looked beautiful, but so sad. And when Calloway walked away, I knew I had to act. It was the chance I never thought I'd have. Amelia felt as though her heart might burst with emotion. All this time, she whispered. You've loved me all this time. And I'll love you for all the time to come, if you'll let me. He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. I'm not asking for your answer today, but I want you to know my intentions and to give you this so you can think about your answer. He opened the box to reveal a ring, not an ostentatious diamond like the one Frederick had given her, but a perfect pearl set in silver, flanked by tiny blue sapphires that matched Yates's eyes. It's beautiful, Amelia gasped, recognizing the pearl as similar to the one in the pendant he had bought for his mother in Cheyenne. Wyoming pearls, Yates explained. From the rivers. Rare and precious, like you. He closed the box and pressed it into her hand. Keep it. Think about whether you could be happy here, with me. When you're ready, whether that's a day or a month or a year from now, let me know your answer. Amelia looked from the small box in her palm to the man before her, and suddenly she knew with absolute certainty what her heart had been telling her for months. Setting the box aside on the porch railing, she stepped closer to him. I don't need time to think, Yates. I know my answer. His eyes widened. You do? Yes, she said simply. My answer is yes. For a moment, he seemed unable to comprehend her words. Then joy blazed across his face like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Truly? You'll marry me. I will, Amelia confirmed, smiling through her tears. I love you, Yates Tucker. I think I started falling for you the moment you rode up to me outside that church. With reverent fingers, Yates took the ring from its box and slipped it onto Amelia's left hand. It fit perfectly, as though destined to be there. Looking up from the pearl gleaming on her finger, Amelia found Yates watching her with such tenderness that it took her breath away. May I kiss you? He asked softly. Just once, before they come looking for us. In answer, Amelia rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle and brief, proper enough should Martha glance outside, yet it contained all the promise of the life they would build together. When they parted, Yates rested his forehead against hers for a moment. I feel like I'm dreaming, he murmured. Not a dream, Amelia assured him, her fingers interlacing with his. A new beginning. They returned inside to find Martha politely occupying herself with tea preparations, though her knowing smile suggested she had witnessed their moment. Shortly after, Charles Sutton and John Hendricks returned from their tour of the ranch, the merchant looking impressed despite himself. Fine operation you're building here, Tucker, he said, warming his hands by the fire. Sound investments, good breeding stock. Thank you, sir, Yates replied. Then, drawing himself up to his full height, he added, Mr. Sutton, with your permission, I've asked Amelia to marry me. She has done me the great honor of accepting. Charles Sutton's eyebrows rose, but he didn't seem entirely surprised. His gaze moved to his daughter, noting her radiant expression and the new ring on her finger. Is this what you want, Amelia? You're certain? More certain than I've ever been of anything. Father, she answered without hesitation. The merchant studied them both for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Well then, I suppose congratulations are in order. He extended his hand to Yates, who shook it firmly. You'll take good care of her. It wasn't a question, but Yates answered anyway. Every day of my life, sir. Mrs. Sutton's reaction to the engagement news was predictably mixed. dismay at the speed of developments battling with reluctant acceptance of the inevitable. But seeing her daughter's happiness gradually softened her opposition. By the time plans were made for a Christmas wedding, she had thrown herself into the preparations with surprising enthusiasm. Silver Creek received the news with varying degrees of surprise. Some townspeople whispered about the scandalous speed of the courtship after Amelia's failed wedding. Others, who had witnessed the obvious devotion between the young couple, offered sincere congratulations. Through it all, Amelia remained serene in her choice. The months of autumn flowed into early winter, each day bringing her closer to the future she had chosen for herself. A future with a man who had loved her from afar for years before fate gave him the chance to ride up when she needed him most. The church in Silver Creek was transformed for Christmas Eve, 1875. Evergreen boughs and red ribbons adorning the pews, candles glowing in every window. Unlike Amelia's previous wedding day, snow fell gently outside, lending a hushed magic to the occasion. In the small room at the back of the church where she prepared for the ceremony, Amelia felt none of the anxiety that had plagued her in June. Her dress was simpler than before, ivory satin with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, designed for winter elegance rather than summer ostentation. Her honey blonde hair was arranged in soft curls beneath a short veil adorned with tiny pearls that matched her engagement ring. Her mother fussed with the veil, emotion making her hands tremble slightly. "You look beautiful, darling," she said, her earlier reservations about the match seemingly forgotten. "Truly radiant." "Thank you, Mother." Amelia squeezed her hand. "For everything. I know this isn't the wedding you imagined for me." Eleanor Sutton's eyes misted. "Perhaps not. But seeing you now." She shook her head. "This is exactly as it should be." The door opened to admit Amelia's father, handsome in his Sunday best. "It's time," he said softly. "Are you ready?" Amelia nodded, a sense of perfect peace settling over her. More than ready. As they took their places at the back of the church, Amelia could see the sanctuary filled with familiar faces, townsfolk, ranch hands, even Martha and John Hendricks seated prominently as honored guests. And at the altar, waiting for her with barely contained joy, stood Yates. He was magnificent in a new black suit, his brown hair neatly trimmed, his face clean-shaven for the occasion. But it was the look in his eyes as they fell upon her that made Amelia's heart soar. Pure love, undisguised and unwavering. The music began, and Amelia moved forward on her father's arm, each step bringing her closer to the future she had chosen. Unlike her previous walk down this aisle, today she felt nothing but certainty and joy. When they reached the altar, Charles Sutton placed Amelia's hand in Yates's with a solemnity that acknowledged the significance of the moment. "Take care of each other," he said simply, then stepped back to join his wife. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful, the pastor's words clear in the hushed church. When it came time for their vows, Yates's voice rang out strong and sure. "I, Yates, take you, Amelia, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." Amelia's response was equally firm, her eyes never leaving his as she made the same sacred promises. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was tender but unabashed, the kiss of a couple who had found their way to each other against all odds and expectations. The celebration that followed at the Sutton home was joyous and heartfelt. Even the most skeptical townspeople seemed won over by the obvious happiness of the bride and groom. As evening deepened, snow continued to fall, transforming Silver Creek into a Christmas wonderland. Eventually, the time came for the newlyweds to depart. Yates had prepared his finest sleigh for the journey to their ranch, lining it with furs and blankets to keep his bride warm on the winter ride. As Amelia changed into her traveling clothes, her mother pressed a package into her hands. "A wedding gift," Eleanor explained. "From your father and me." Inside was a beautiful quilt, hand-stitched by her mother over the past months. "For your new home," she said softly. Every bride should have something from her mother to take with her. Tears pricked Amelia's eyes as she embraced her parents. "Thank you for everything." Outside, Yates helped her into the sleigh amid good-natured teasing from well-wishers. As they pulled away, the sound of bells jingling on the horses' harnesses Amelia leaned against her husband's shoulder, contentment filling her like warm honey. "Happy, Mrs. Tucker?" Yates asked, his arms secure around her. "Perfectly," she assured him, tilting her face up for a kiss that promised all the warmth they would share when they reached home. The sleigh carried them through the snowy night, away from Silver Creek and toward the ranch that waited for them. Their ranch now, their home, their future. As the lights of town receded behind them, Amelia thought of how far she had come since that June day when everything she thought she wanted had slipped through her fingers. What had seemed like an ending had been only a beginning. The groom who rejected her at the altar had unknowingly set her on a path to true happiness. And the cowboy who had been in the back row, who rode up quietly when she needed him most, he had become the love of her life, the partner she would choose again and again if given 1,000 chances. As their ranch came into view, lights glowing welcomingly from windows Martha had prepared for their arrival, Amelia knew with bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly the right man beside her. The road ahead might hold challenges, but they would face them together, with the same courage and honesty that had brought them to this moment. And that, she thought as Yates helped her from the sleigh and carried her across the threshold of their home, was the most beautiful happy ending and beginning she could imagine.